the signals are there. Pilots are trained for this type of scenario where the pilot loses consciousness or even dies. We're trained for that. But what I'm saying is a more dangerous thing could be a sudden control input from a pilot because of a seizure. And we've had reports of seizures now that are starting to happen to pilots in the cockpit.
How many of you knew all that was happening in commercial aviation? Hey everyone, our country is at a severe inflection point in the aviation industry and also in the culture itself. We take the wrong turn and the consequences may be unrecoverable. We maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, and take the proper action, and we can recover this unusual attitude. Aviators, you know what I mean.
When you have a job like that, where you have so many lives at risk at one time, and people don't think about that too much, but it's really a critical job.
Yeah, when nothing happens and everything is nice and quiet in the cockpit, anybody can do it. But when the bells and whistles start going off, that's when you need the experience.
Yeah, it's like a doctor, a surgeon. People have a lot of respect for surgeons. I do too. I mean, they do great work. But how many people are at risk at one time when you're under the knife? Yeah. One. How many people are at risk when you're in the cockpit of an airliner and you've got a critical situation to deal with? You see the difference?
One of those things is not only do
and I'm still amazed even to this day that any airplane can get airborne on time with all of the things that need to be done, all of the safety checks that need to be happen. And, this is all going on behind the scenes. Brett, you and I know this, but passengers don't know. They don't think
ignorance
about
is bliss.
But, that airplane is scrutinized constantly. And, there are mechanics that are looking at that thing between flights. Either the captain or the first officer is required to do a cursory pre-flight before each and every flight. I mean, it's that big of a deal. So look for something that's loose or something that might be leaking. And, airplanes aren't perfect. Things break. There has to be hard lines in the sand for safety. Yeah. And there are some hard lines, but unfortunately, some of those lines are being broken.
Yeah, during the course of our careers, we both saw, particularly in maybe the last 10 years, some significant signs of degradation to the industry beginning to happen. And then we began to see the rise of some significant medical tyranny beginning to happen when the pandemic was introduced to the world. In fact, we talked about this before. I received a career-ending ultimatum from my employer during that time, and you did too. I'm listening to lots and lots of stories on the news about severe, sudden, and quick, even fatal reactions. And some of these fatalities happen within just minutes of people getting a shot.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much when,
and that's an absolute fact, Brett. And I got to tell your listening audience, there is something seriously wrong with our society when, according to the own CDC records, 1,150 people died the same day they got that shot. And this is in the United States. And some of those deaths happened in full view of people waiting in line to get theirs. And they still stayed in line.
What happened to that guy? That's not going to happen to me because I'm going to take the risk, and he wasn't lucky. And
you know how they got away with doing that? Because they scared people. They scared the daylights out of people, saying that if you come in contact with this virus, it will kill you. And the only way to protect yourself is with this shot that they're calling a vaccine. Yeah. And what's in the shot? The worst part of the virus. That's
we
what's
can talk about that here in a few minutes as well.
Why do people do that?
But I want to know because
you need to know what's in it and what the reactions can possibly be, and you need to have the right to refuse that. Now, all of those things that I just mentioned, Brett, are in the emergency use authorization that was given to both Pfizer and Moderna. It is in the emergency use authorization that all of these requirements must be met. You must tell the person this is experimental. You must tell the person that there are possible adverse reactions that can happen, including death, and you have the right to refuse it. And by refusing it, it should not affect your ability to continue to operate in your workplace, and it shouldn't affect your ability to get medical care. That's in the rules, Brett. And what happened? Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite happened. The FAA, literally the day after emergency use authorization was given to Pfizer, which was on December the 11th, 2020, the FAA made the announcement that it is safe for all pilots and air traffic controllers to go out and get this shot, and it will not affect their ability to hold their medical certificate, which is required for them to either be an air traffic controller or a pilot. And that goes directly against their guidance, Brett. We can talk about what the guidance is, but that goes directly against it. Why did that happen? We need to find out.
I totally remember when that came out, and I was just in absolute disbelief.
Joining us now is someone who's fighting hard for one group affected by all this, and that's airline pilots. He's a pilot himself and a proud veteran, president of US Freedom Flyers, Josh Yoder. Josh, great to see you, and thank you for what you're doing here. Tell us about the situation with respect to airline pilots.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for having me on. You know, the organization U.S. Freedom Flyers was started in August of 2021 to stand up against the looming federal mandates. In large part, we had a tremendous amount of success, but there were certainly airlines that did fire their employees. And the amount of devastation that has been caused has been tremendous. I spoke just today, actually, with several pilots who have been fired, and their lives have been turned upside down. You know, some of them have lost their families, they've lost their homes, they've lost everything over something that was a complete lie. You know, the Biden administration lied to us. They illegally mandated an emergency use authorization drug, and the companies jumped on board.
Is there any legal recourse? I mean, what can we do about this?
There certainly is legal recourse. Something that's been on the books, a law that's been on the books for years in the United States, says that it is illegal to mandate an emergency use authorization drug. And I think this is the thing that we really need to pull the attention to. What they did was in fact criminal. They broke the law when they did it, and there must be accountability. And that's what U.S. Freedom Flyers is really focused on, not only caring for the people who've been affected on a personal level, but also bring the litigation, now specifically going after the Federal Aviation Administration. Had they done their job, no pilot in this country would ever have been allowed to take an emergency use authorization drug. There's a major safety component there that was broken.
I found out that you were involved with the Freedom Flyers as well. And now, just recently, you've taken on a big new role with that organization. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I decided to take on the role as vice president of U.S. Freedom Flyers. And, you know, the reason is because I feel that I have the communication skills to talk to not only people within the FAA, but people on government levels as well about how the rollout of this shot has significantly affected aviation safety. And I think the FAA is fully aware of this. In fact, they put out a SAFO, which stands for Safety Alert for Operators. They put this out in March of 2023, indicating that there was a significant uptick in aircraft incursions, which basically means aircraft getting too close to one another. And this could happen for a number of reasons. It could be brain fog on behalf of a controller, or it could be a pilot error. It could be fatigue. It could be a staffing issue. It could also be tied to the shot, because we know that the shot can cause adverse reactions, including brain fog and blood clotting, which can affect your ability to think. It can also cause strokes, seizures, things that you do not want happening to a pilot when they're in control of an aircraft.
I just remember
heart attack. Literally the month after that SAFO came out from the FAA warning all passenger carrying airlines about this uptick in safety signal. Literally the next month, General James McConville, who was Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, grounded all Army aviators for 1 month.
Yep.
And they did that because there were, as you said, some of these things are single pilot, operations that are happening. Well, there were crashes and people died and they couldn't figure out why. And so they thought maybe it was a training problem. So they just brought everything to a grinding halt. So yeah, they recognize that there's a problem there also. And so there is what looks to be a significant increase in pilot incapacitations at major airline carriers all over the world. We're seeing that because they're being reported in various substacks that are, publicly available.
Right.
One is Dr. William Mackus, that's up in Canada, who's kept a very good track record of pilot incapacitations.
That's
and so through U.S. Freedom Flyers, we have a FOIA request directly to the FAA, to their CAMI, it's the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, where they keep track of pilot incapacitations. And we have asked for that database. We want to see all pilot incapacitations that have happened in the United States airspace. And I asked for this on Valentine's Day, and we're months down the road, and I have not gotten a response from them. And we're going to take a significant look at that data and see if there is a signal in there. We feel that there is, and then we need to talk to Congress about this. I would encourage, anyone listening to this, action steps to take. Number one, please join usfreedomflyers.org. You do not have to be a pilot. We are there to protect everyone, including the traveling public. So join usfreedomflyers.org. That way you'll be able to keep up on what we're doing on this front. And we plan to bring a lawsuit against the FAA to hold them accountable for what they've done, because pilots have died that should not have died, Brett. And I've got the data on this.
Mm-hmm.
I've tied pilot names to obituaries that clearly show that they were pilots for these airlines, and they died young. They died before the normal retirement age of 65. Now, that does happen, but it doesn't happen with the frequency that started happening right after this shot rolled out in 2021. There was a 40% increase. That's not normal. So I'm telling you, there is a definite tie-in to this shot and early pilot deaths. And I feel that there is a tie-in also with pilot incapacitations. Now, how do we prove that? Well, we have to do what's called data collection. And, Brett, you were in the FAA. You know how it works. It's all about data collection. They have a huge data safety base called this SMS, Safety Management System. Everything goes into that database, and they're looking for signals. And mainly what they're tracking is, aircraft stuff, the parts, what happens to aircraft, any emergencies, engine failures, parts wearing out prematurely. But what are they not checking? Personnel. And they should be. They're not even keeping track of who got the shot, when they got it, and when their last one was, and did they get a booster shot or not. It's not part of a pilot's medical record, and it should be. But what I alluded to earlier in the program was that seizures are also an adverse effect of this shot. And I believe that that's going to be more of a danger to safety of flight. And the reason I say that is because when you get what's called a tonic seizure, it's violent. And
you'll take a look just before you go on. If people have seen video of athletes on playing fields going into that kind of a seizure, you're right. That's violent, and they have some severe reactions. So go ahead.
There was an investigation into pilot incapacitations that was done from 2009 to 2015, and they did find one instance of a pilot the captain having a seizure during the landing phase of flight. And as I said, it's extremely violent. The body goes rigid, and what happened was the captain's leg fully extended and pushed the rudder all the way to the floor, and the aircraft left the runway and stopped quickly. No other aircraft was hit, and no one was injured, but still, you can see how violent of a reaction it is. Now, what I'm saying is, it happens with such strength and force that in this particular pilot that it happened to, the shoulder was broken, and also they got a lumbar fracture from this, a lumbar compression fracture. That's how violent this is. Now, here's the problem, Brett. Everybody knows that's a pilot that's listening to this program right now knows that the rudder pedals are connected between the captain and the first officer. When one set of pedals moves, the other moves as well because they are connected by cables. So if one of those rudder pedals gets pushed fully to the floor and it's unexpected, and that person, their leg is locked against the seat, there is no way that the other pilot is going to be able to put in an opposite flight control to overcome that. Even with the ailerons, it cannot be done. We've lost a couple of aircraft over this already. One happened at U.S. Air. It happened to U.S. Air Flight 427 on September the 8th, 1994, landing at the Pittsburgh International Airport. They were on final approach, and everything was fine. And all of a sudden, the aircraft spun into the ground. And what they found was that there was a full rudder input that was put in by one of the pilots, or maybe it was a servo failure that caused the rudder to fully, be deployed. And again, you cannot overcome that even with ailerons. And so you can look, you can't. And the aircraft will stall and spin into the ground. And that's what happened. And it was a horrific accident. And it happened again. This was American Airlines Flight 587 that took off out of the JFK airport on November the 12th of 2001. And it was a wide-body aircraft, an A300, big jet. And the first officer overreacted to turbulence encounter and put in a full rudder input, and it caused the aircraft to crash. And so, you remember that. So these are instances where this has happened before. And what I'm saying is, if we have a pilot that has a tonic seizure and puts a full unexpected flight control input, and the other pilot cannot overcome it, we're going to have a disaster. Now, we had a very, very close call, and this just happened in November of this past year. It was a flight coming in from from Paris, landing in Philadelphia. It was American Airlines Flight 755, another big aircraft, a Boeing 787. And I wrote about this in my Substack. And they were on final approach. They were either just outside the final approach fix or very close to it. And the first officer, who was the flying pilot, had a complete tonic seizure that I'm talking about, where the entire body went completely stiff.
Right.
His arms went above his head and all the way back. And luckily, his feet were not on the rudder pedals and slid underneath the rudder pedals. Now, this was an international flight, so they had the relief officer on the jump seat, and the relief pilot was able to pull that incapacitated pilot out of the seat, and he was able to jump into the seat, and they continued the flight, and they landed safely. Nobody in the back even knew that this happened. The autopilot didn't even go off. Nothing bad happened, but that was a close call. So these are all safety signals. So what I'm saying is we need to start testing pilots right now to see if they've got clotting issues, because Seizure like
Yes.
that is caused from something that has gone wrong in the brain tissue. That can happen from a clotting issue. It can also happen from a tumor. And we now know that these shots can be tied to aggressive tumors and even glioblastomas in the brain. It's all there. So what I'm saying is there's enough signals that we should be having the FAA take a closer look at pilots when they get their flight physicals, and it's all for safety.
Yeah.
We're headed for a disaster, unfortunately, and you know this as well as I do, Brett. Some of the major changes that have happened in aviation that are safety related are written in blood. What do I mean by that? It came from a horrific accident. Remember the crash of the perfectly normal wide body L-1011 that crashed in the Everglades? That was a Eastern Airlines pilot. All three pilots were distracted because of a light in the cockpit. And they didn't realize that the aircraft was slowly descending and it crashed into the Everglades. So as a result of that, it's a requirement for all passenger aircraft to have an emergency alerting device in the cockpit, and it's called the ground proximity warning system. When you get close to the ground, that thing yells at you. So, yeah, it's written in blood.
That's what we said in the Air Force, too. We said the reason we got this new emergency procedures checklist item is because somebody died.
Exactly.
Because something happened in one of his fighters. And now we have a new checklist.
What I don't want to see happen is we lost an airplane because a pilot had a seizure because they may have gotten this shot. I don't want to ever see that happen. I just want to remind everybody that flying is still inherently safe. It's very safe, and we want to keep it that way. And U.S. Freedom Flyers, we are dedicated to being really the only FAA watchdog right now that is focused on pilot health and medical standards and reporting on these things to keep flying safe. So that's our goal. That's our mission. Well, I haven't given any congressional testimony yet, but I do plan to. And so we need to call for immediate cessation of all mRNA injections that go into flight crews. And I'll give you a very easy biological explanation for why that is. The delivery systems that they're using in this mRNA technology is something that's called a lipid nanoparticle. And basically it's a large fat bubble. Now, inside that larger fat bubble, there are smaller fat bubbles. And those are proprietary. Moderna has theirs, and Pfizer has theirs. But inside those proprietary fat bubbles, which are toxic, by the way, they are known to be toxic. And if you look them up, they're not even supposed to be used in veterinary medicine. They're that toxic. But they got into these shots because of the emergency use authorization. So anyway, the messenger RNA that is inside these little fat bubbles, when it gets released into the cytoplasm of the cell, it has the instructions to make a protein. It's a foreign protein. Well, any cells that are making foreign proteins are going to be attacked by your immune system. That's just how it's designed to work. And so if you're injecting something into the body to make foreign proteins on purpose, those cells are going to be attacked and they're going to be destroyed. Now, this can happen in localized areas of the body. For example, if it happens in the heart musculature, you're going to end up with myocarditis. Could be subclinical myocarditis. Could be something that could result in sudden cardiac failure. Okay? Or it can happen all over the body. And that's called multi-inflammatory syndrome because it can affect all tissues of the body. And the reason, Brett, is because of the delivery system that they're using. That bigger lipid nanoparticle that I talked about is non-toxic. It's made of normal body fats. It's made out of cholesterol, and the other one is DSPC. That's the same stuff that your body cells are made of. And it was designed that way so that it would literally go everywhere. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And literally any cell that these bigger lipid nanoparticles bump into, they will merge. And that allows the smaller lipid nanoparticles to get inside of the cytoplasm. And when those smaller lipid nanoparticles dissolve, which is what they're designed to do, they're designed to dissolve under certain pH conditions. That's the acidity of your cell. The mRNA gets released and it starts making this foreign protein. So all of this mRNA technology, all of it is going to be making what are called, I call them bioactive proteins. And what do I mean by that? Well, a bioactive protein is one that when it gets made and released from the cell and gets into your blood or your lymph, it is going to attach to cellular receptors. It's not going to be willingly taken in by cells. It attaches to cellular receptors. So we're talking about proteins here, okay? And these aren't like proteins that you eat or proteins that your body is making and releasing all of the time that are used for other purposes. No, those are willingly taken in by cells, but not these proteins. These proteins are made by this synthetic messenger RNA. They are bioactive. They are going to attach to cellular receptors. Anytime something attaches to a cellular receptor, your immune system is going to attack and destroy those cells. So it results in pathology. And it results in pathology that sometimes happens quickly or sometimes can happen over a number of years. And I think that's where we are right now, Brett. I think we're starting to just see the fallout of this. And we're seeing it in aviation, particularly in the increased level of pilots going out on long-term disabilities for whatever reason. They're getting cancers, they're getting neurological problems, they're having vascular issues. And these are things that are sneaking up on pilots. And it's taking a long time for some of these things to show up, but they are showing up in greater and greater numbers.
Exactly.
And you know, if we allow this stuff to continue to go into flight crews, then we're going to continue to have the problem. And the biggest problem, and you mentioned it, is the booster shot, because we now know that the more booster shots you get, the greater your chances are of having what's called an IgG shift, an immunoglobulin shift that happens in your body. And basically what that does is it tells your immune system to stand down. It just stands down. It doesn't even attack the viruses that are going to come through and the bacteria. And that's why people are more susceptible to getting chronic illnesses now. This is
so the more booster shots you get, the worse your immunology is, and your immune system is basically non-functional after several of those.
You're making your immune system weaker over time, is what you're doing.
Every shot.
And it also targets your immune system to look for the wrong thing. You're injecting something to make a protein, and it makes lots and lots of that protein. I mean, billions of these little protein particles start floating around, and your immune system will make antibodies against that. That's what your immune system is designed to do. It makes antibodies against that foreign protein. Well, you're injecting a foreign protein that doesn't even exist anymore. It's outdated. So it's training your immune system to look for the wrong thing. It's looking for what you're injecting. It's not looking for what actually exists. And people don't get that. They need to understand that. Let me give you another little philosophical tidbit to think about.
You bet.
Antibodies are very powerful things. They are. They can save your life. For example, if you're bitten by a rattlesnake, okay, you go to the hospital, and what do? They inject you with anti-venom. Anti-venom is antibodies. That's what they are. Where did they get those antibodies? They got those antibodies from an animal that was bitten by a rattlesnake and developed perfect antibodies against rattlesnake venom. All of it, all parts of the venom, all of it. But it's a perfect antibody because it came from an animal that experienced the entire thing.
Right.
Same thing with rabies. Okay. If you're bitten by an animal that has a rabies infection, the first thing they do is they put rabies antibodies in you that they got from an animal that experienced the rabies virus. All of it, the whole thing. So, yes, antibodies are a very powerful thing and they can save your life. But I will tell you, and this is from the training and the research that I've done, the only way that you can get that kind of an antibody is by experiencing a natural infection.
Right.
It has to come in your body in a natural way through the barrier that separates the inside of you from the outside. It's called the epithelial barrier. And by doing so, when your body experiences that, it memorizes the entire thing, whatever it is, the whole bacteria, all parts of it, the whole virus, all parts of it, so that if any part of that virus or bacteria changes in the future, your immune memory still has enough there to recognize the new variant, and it keeps you protected. That's what immunity is. But what are we doing with this technology? We're injecting something through the barrier. We're ignoring the barrier. And we're telling the immune system to focus on just this one little part of it, not the whole thing. And by doing so, you're retraining your immune system, and it's not able to see the other things that are out there.
So you're not only not protecting against what you wanted to protect against, so you thought, but you're also destroying your immune system so that everything else goes bad.
Everything else can get through as well, because you're retraining and focusing your immune system on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And why is this happening? Because you're injecting this platform that creates, as I said, billions and billions of these suboptimal antibodies.
Yeah.
That's not a natural thing to do. We should not be doing this. And
we're totally on the wrong vector in that regard.
We are,
in my opinion.
And so we got to
go ahead.
We got to stop these injections from going into all flight crews looking forward.
I think you're right. And I would think that the freedom flyers would be able to put out the word and just help as many flight crews as possible do this.
Yeah,
there is hope. We've got to get our flight crews well. I think we've been talking for many minutes here about some of the bad things that are happening with respect to the so-called vaccine, but treatments are available. So we've got to get our flight crews, we've got to get our flight attendants, the wrench tuners, air traffic controllers, anybody that's been affected in the aviation industry by this gene therapy. We've got to get them fixed. And so, what steps can we take, to fix this horrible mess?
Now, I mentioned U.S. Freedom Flyers for people to consider joining, because we do have a way to connect people that have vaccine injuries to medical services that we have found and we have investigated, and they have protocols that are definitely showing improvement. And so we can make connections with people directly to medical service providers. Some of these providers you would have to visit in person. Others can work with you through telemedicine. But again, all of there is help available, and that's the good news. Yeah, that's the good news. To make a meaning.
I think, the more we take time to educate the public is how that's going to happen. So I think, interviews and discussions like this, as soon as people begin to understand what is actually going on.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing right now, Brett. And I really appreciate the opportunity, to talk about these things, because it's all education. The more people know about
Totally.
what's really going on, the smarter they become, and they're not going to be fooled the next time, because
Exactly.
believe me, they will try this again. They will.